Members of the Commission, with your help, your staff has developed initial findings on the performance of the intelligence community against the danger of Islamic extremist terrorism before the September 11th attacks on the United States. These findings may help frame some of the issues for this hearing and inform your work. In Staff Statement number 7, we discussed our initial findings on the work of the CIA as an instrument of national policy in the areas of clandestine and covert action. Today, we focus on intelligence analysis and warning, the collection of intelligence, and the overall management of the intelligence community before September 11, 2001. This report reflects the results of our work on these issues so far. We remain ready to revise our understanding of these topics as our work continues. The staff statement represents the collective efforts of a number of members of our staff: Kevin Scheid, Lori Fenner, Gordon Letterman, Lloyd Salvetti, and Doug McEachen did much of the investigative work reflected in this statement. We built upon the very significant work done on this topic in 2002 by the Congressional Joint Inquiry. All the agencies of the intelligence community made the necessary documents and witnesses available to us, often with a considerable investment of time and effort. I'd like to skip over the initial section of the statement that explains this creature of our government called the intelligence community and its relation to terrorism, and just begin at the top of page 3, where we talk about their analysis of a new danger. Information comes to intelligence agencies from many sources. These sources include the reports from other U.S. government agencies, such as the State Department, from counterparts in foreign security agencies, from human agents, from signals intelligence such as communications, from imagery, and from open sources like foreign newspapers. The CIA was originally created, in large part, to sort through all such sources and offer unbiased assessments to the nation's leaders. In other words, although the CIA became and remains a principal collector and operator in its own right, its first duty was to provide integrated analysis. Analysis is more than a news report. Tactical analysis studies a particular case involving an individual or group as a guide to specific operations. Strategic analysis looks beyond the particular in order to see patterns, notice gaps, or assemble a larger picture on a wider time frame to guide the development of national policy. Budget cuts in the National Foreign Intelligence Program from fiscal years 1990 to 1996, and essentially flat budgets from fiscal years 1996 to 2000, except for the so-called Gingrich supplemental of fiscal year 1999, caused significant staffing reductions that constrained the numbers and training of analysts. Analysis was already a relatively minor part of intelligence budgets devoted mainly to collection and operations. Meanwhile, during the 1990s, the rise of round-the-clock news shows and the Internet reinforced pressure on the diminishing number of intelligence analysts to pass along fresh reports to policymakers at an ever faster pace, trying to add context or supplement what their policy consumers were receiving from the media. Many officials told us that the demands of providing current intelligence and briefings to more and more consumers, both in the executive branch and in Congress, drained scarce resources away from systematic, reflective, strategic analysis. In the late 1990s, weaknesses in all source and strategic analysis were spotlighted by independent panels critiquing the intelligence community's failure to foresee the India-Pakistan nuclear weapons tests in 1998 and its limited ability to assess the ballistic missile threat to the United States in 1999. The first panel was led by Admiral David Jeremiah, the second by Donald Rumsfeld. Both panels called attention to the dispersal of efforts on too many priorities, declining attention to the craft of strategic analysis, budget constraints, sophisticated denial and deception efforts by adversaries, and security rules that prevented adequate sharing of information. We found similar shortcomings with the quality of finished intelligence on transnational terrorism prior to 9/11. While we now know that Al-Qaeda was formed in 1988 at the end of the Soviet occupation of Afghanistan, the intelligence community did not describe this organization, at least in documents we have seen, until 1999. As late as 1997, the Counterterrorist Center characterized Osama bin Laden as a financier of terrorism. This was at a time when the intelligence community had recently received a major input of new information, revealing that bin Laden headed his own terrorist organization with its own targeting agenda and operational commanders. This new information also revealed the previously unknown involvement of bin Laden's organization in the 1992 attack on the Yemen hotel quartering U.S. military personnel and the 1993 shoot-down of U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopters in Somalia, and quite possibly in the 1995 Riyadh bombing of the American training mission to the Saudi Arabian National Guard. Nor had analysts worked through answers to questions about links between bin Laden and his associates with the bombing of the World Trade Center in 1993 and the Manila Airlines plot of 1994. The most impressive piece of analysis on the emerging transnational terrorist threat was the 1995 National Intelligence Estimate entitled "The Foreign Terrorist Threat to the United States." It judged, at the time, that the most likely threat of attack in the United States would be from transient groupings of individuals similar to those drawn together by Ramzi Youssef. Such groupings lack strong organization, but rather are loose affiliations. The NIE warned of terrorist attacks in the United States over the following 2 years. It was updated in 1997. As we mentioned in Staff Statement Number 5, by early 1997, the United States had received dramatic new information about the organization of al-Qaeda and its efforts to mount catastrophic attacks against the United States. The 1997 update failed to reflect this new information. No comprehensive national estimates were subsequently produced on terrorism prior to the attacks on 9/11. Thousands of particular reports were circulated. A number of very good analytical papers were distributed on specific topics such as bin Laden's political philosophy, his command of a global network, analysis of information from terrorists captured in Jordan in December '99, al-Qaeda's operational style, and on the evolving goals of the international extremist movement. Hundreds of articles from morning briefings were prepared for the highest officials in the government, with titles such as "Bin Laden Threatening to Attack U.S. Aircraft," 1998. UBL plans for reprisals against U.S. targets, possibly in U.S., 1998. Strained service between Taliban and bin Laden, 1999. Terrorist threats to U.S. interests in Caucasus, 99. Bin Laden to exploit looser security during holidays, 99. Bin Laden evading sanctions, 2000. Bin Laden's interest in biological and radiological weapons, February 2001. Taliban holding firm on bin Laden for now, 2001. Terrorist groups said cooperating on U.S. hostage plot, May 2001. And bin Laden determined to strike in U.S., August 2001. Despite such reports, and a 1999 paper on bin Laden's command structure for al-Qaeda, there were no complete authoritative portraits of his strategy and the extent of his organization's involvement in past terrorist attacks. Nor had the community provided an authoritative depiction of his organization's relationships with other governments, or the scale of the threat his organization posed to the United States. A few analysts within the CTC were dedicated to working on bin Laden. One of them had developed a lengthy, comprehensive paper on his organization by 1998. Her supervisor did not consider the paper publishable and broke the topic down into 4 papers assigned to 4 other available analysts. As an indicator of the scarcity of analysts and the press of current intelligence reporting work, it took more than 2 years for 2 of these papers to be published at all. The other 2 were not finished until after 9/11. Some officials, including Deputy DCI John McLaughlin, are skeptical about the importance of comprehensive estimates. McLaughlin has been in charge of the estimate process. He told us such estimates are time-consuming to prepare, judgments are watered down in negotiations, conclusions may duplicate those already circulated in more specific papers, and he and others said that key policymakers understood the threat. Other officials, however, stress the importance of such estimates as a process that surfaces and clarifies disagreements. Through coordination and vetting views, the community comes to a collective understanding of the nature of the threat it faces, what is known, unknown, and a discussion of how to close these gaps. Most important, our interviews of senior policymakers in both administrations revealed a fundamental uncertainty about how to regard the threat posed by bin Laden and al-Qaeda. After 9/11, the catastrophic character of this threat seems obvious. It is hard now to recapture the old conventional wisdom before 9/11. For example, a New York Times investigation in April 1999 sought to debunk claims that bin Laden was a terrorist leader, with the headline, U.S. hard put to find proof that bin Laden directed attacks. The head of analysis at the Counterterrorist Center until 1999 regarded the bin Laden danger as still in the realm of past experience, discounting the alarms about a catastrophic threat as relating only to the danger of chemical, biological, or nuclear attack, which he downplayed, referring in 2001, before 9/11, to the overheated rhetoric on the subject. In other words, before the attack, we found uncertainty among senior officials about whether this was just a new and especially venomous version of the ordinary terrorist threat America had lived with for decades, or was radically new, posing a threat beyond any yet experienced. Some pointed out to us that before 9/11, al-Qaeda was considered responsible for the deaths of less than 50 Americans, all of them overseas. Former officials, including an NSC staffer working for Richard Clarke, told us the threat was seen as one that could cause hundreds of casualties, not thousands. Such differences affect calculations about whether or how to go to war. Even officials who acknowledge a vital threat intellectually may not be ready to act upon such beliefs at great costs or at high risk. Therefore, the government experts who believed there was such a danger needed a process that could win and acknowledge broad support for their views, or at least spotlight the areas of dispute. Such a process could also prompt action across the government. The national estimate process has often played this role, and it is sometimes controversial for this very reason. It played no role in judging the threat posed by al-Qaeda. In the Counterterrorist Center, priority was given to tactical analysis to support operations. Although the Counterterrorist Center formally reports to the DCI, the center is effectively embedded in the CIA's Directorate of Operations, or was. The center had difficulty attracting talented analysts from their traditional billets in the agency's Directorate of Intelligence. The Counterterrorist Center also was especially vulnerable to the pressures that placed reporting ahead of research and analysis. Strategic analysis was a luxury that the strained cadres of analysts in the center could rarely indulge. In late 2000, DCI Tenet recognized the deficiency of strategic analysis against al-Qaeda. He appointed a senior manager to tackle the problem within the Counterterrorist Center. In March 2001, this manager briefed DCI Tenet on creating a strategic assessment capability. The CTC established a new strategic assessments branch during July 2001. The decision to add about 10 analysts to this effort was seen at the time as a major bureaucratic victory. The CTC labored to find analysts to serve in that office. The new chief of that branch reported for duty on September 10, 2001. Warning in the case of aircraft as weapons. Since the Pearl Harbor attack of 1941, the intelligence community has devoted generations of effort to understanding the problem of warning against surprise attack. Rigorous analytic methods were developed, focused in particular on the Soviet Union. Several leading practitioners within the intelligence community discussed them with us. They've been articulated in many ways, but almost all seem to have about 4 elements in common. 1, think about how surprise attacks might be launched. 2, identify telltale indicators connected to the most dangerous possibilities. 3, where feasible, collect intelligence against these indicators. And 4, adopt defenses to deflect the most dangerous possibilities, or at least get more warning. Concern about warning issues arising after the end of the Gulf War led to a major study conducted for DCI Robert Gates in 1992, which recommended several measures, including a stronger national intelligence officer for warning. We were told that these measures languished under Gates' successors. The National Intelligence Officer for Warning yielded responsibility to the Counterterrorist Center in handling warnings related to a terrorist attack. Those responsibilities were passed to an intelligence community counterterrorism board that would issue periodic threat advisories. With the important exception of al-Qaeda efforts in chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear weapons, We did not find evidence that this process regularly applied the methods to avoid surprise attack that had been so laboriously developed over the years. There was, for example, no evident intelligence community analysis of the danger of boat bombs before the attack on the USS Cole in October 2000, although expertise about such means of attack existed within the community, especially at the Office of Naval Intelligence. Amid the thousands of threat reports, some mentioned aircraft in the years before 9/11. The most prominent hijacking threat report came from a foreign government source in late 1998 and discussed a plan for hijacking a plane in order to gain hostages and bargain for the release of prisoners such as the blind sheikh. As we mentioned yesterday in Staff Statement Number 10, this 1998 report was the source of the allusion to hijacking in the President's Daily Brief article provided to President Bush in August 2001. Other threat reports mention the possibility of using an aircraft laden with explosives. Of these, the most prominent asserted a possible plot to fly an explosives-laden aircraft into a U.S. city. This report was circulated in September 1998 and originated from a source who walked into an American consulate in East Asia. Neither the source's reliability nor the information could be corroborated. In addition, an Algerian group hijacked an airliner in 1994 in order to fly it into the Eiffel Tower, but they could not fly the plane. There was also in 1994 the private airplane crashing into the White House South Lawn. In early 95, Abdul Hakim Murad, Ramzi Youssef's accomplice in the Manila Airlines bombing plot, told Philippine authorities that he and Youssef had discussed flying a plane into CIA headquarters. A 96 report asserted that Iranians were plotting to hijack a Japanese plane and crash it in Tel Aviv. These past episodes suggest possibilities. Alone, they are not warnings, but returning to the four elements mentioned above, the CTC did not analyze how a hijacked aircraft or other explosives-laden aircraft might be used as a weapon. If it had done so, it could have identified that a critical obstacle would be to find a suicide terrorist able to fly large jet aircraft. This had never happened before 9/11. The CTC did not develop a set of telltale indicators for this means of attack. For example, one such indicator might be the discovery of terrorists seeking or taking flight training to fly large jet aircraft or seeking to buy advanced flight simulators. The CTC did not propose, and the intelligence community collection management process did not set, collection requirements against such telltale indicators. Therefore, the warning system was not looking for information, such as the July 2001 FBI report of terrorist interest in various kinds of aircraft training in Arizona, or the August 2001 arrest of Zacarias Moussaoui because of his suspicious behavior in a Minnesota flight school. In late August, the Moussaoui arrest was briefed to the DCI and other top CIA officials under the heading, quote, "Islamic extremist learns to fly," close quote. The news had no evident effect on warning. Neither the intelligence community nor the NSC policy process analyzed systemic defenses of aircraft or against suicide aircraft. The many threat reports mentioning aircraft were passed to the FAA. We discussed the problems at that agency in Staff Statements 3 and 4. Richard Clark told us that he was concerned about this threat in the context of protecting the Atlanta Olympics in June 1996, the White House complex, and the 2001 G8 summit in Genoa, but he attributed his awareness to novels more than any warnings from the intelligence community. He did not pursue the systemic issues of defending aircraft from suicide hijackers or bolstering wider air defenses. Let's turn now to the issues of intelligence collection and management, and for that I'd like to ask Kevin Scheid to continue.
Mr. Chairman, the Counterterrorism Center and the larger intelligence community tried to understand the emerging terrorist threat with the traditional collection methods of human source collection, or the use of informants, information provided by foreign intelligence services, signals collection, or the intercept of communications, and open sources, or the systematic collection of print, broadcast, and in the late 1990s, internet information. Imagery intelligence was extremely valuable for targeting cruise missiles, interpreting predator videos, and identifying training camps in Afghanistan. This form of intelligence collection worked well, but its sustained effectiveness depended on cues provided by the other sources of intelligence. Human source intelligence is conducted by both the CIA and the Defense Intelligence Agency, DIA. Gaining access to organizations or individuals who have access to terrorist groups has proven extremely difficult for both the CIA and the DIA. This has led to a heavy reliance on walk-ins and on foreign intelligence services. Often CIA's best sources of information on terrorist organizations have been volunteers or walk-ins who approach U.S. personnel at embassies and other places for a variety of reasons. But evaluating these volunteers and walk-ins is a time-consuming and sometimes risky proposition. The ratio of valuable information providers to charlatans, fabricators, or double agents is about 1 to 10. That is, for every 10 walk-ins, only one produces information of value to the intelligence community or U.S. policymakers. Yet some of the best sources on al-Qaeda during the 1990s were walk-ins. One of these individuals, Jamal al-Fadl, began providing information in 1996 and has testified in open court. Foreign security services also played a critical role in understanding the terrorist threat. The United States government relied and relies today heavily on this assistance. A major function of the intelligence community is the development and maintenance of these information sharing relationships, which may include expenditures to help the foreign agency improve its own capabilities. Before 9/11, the U.S. government developed especially helpful relationships with several governments in the Middle East and Southeast Asia. Where these relationships work, the local services have an enormous advantage in collecting intelligence. Of course, the quality of these relationships varied. The German government provided the U.S. government information on an individual named Marwan, who was acquainted with the target of a German investigation. The common first name and a phone number in the United Arab Emirates were provided as a possible lead in 1999. The CTC pursued this lead for a short time, but with the scant information provided, the CTC found nothing to provoke a special effort on this lead. The CIA did not ask any other agency in the intelligence community for assistance. We now know that Marwan was Marwan al-Shihi, who later piloted United Airlines Flight 175 into the South Tower of the World Trade Center. He used the UAE telephone number in the period prior to the 9/11 attacks. We're continuing to investigate this episode. We also corroborated that some countries did not support U.S. efforts to collect intelligence information on terrorist cells in their countries or did not share the American assessments of the threat. According to a former chief of the CTC, before 9/11, many liaison services were highly skeptical and, quote, frankly thought we were crazy, close quote. They saw bin Laden as more of an oddball than a real terrorist threat. This was especially true for some of the European services. Most importantly, from our interviews, it is clear that the community has no comprehensive and integrated foreign liaison strategy. Each agency pursues foreign partnerships unilaterally and has done so for many years with minimal interagency coordination. Signals intelligence has been another source of terrorist-related information. The United States spends a great deal on signals intelligence capabilities. Signals intelligence provides global reach through land, air, sea, and space-based systems. But U.S. capabilities have been challenged by the use of modern systems and the operational security practiced by the current generation of terrorists. Moreover, serious legal and policy challenges arise for foreign intelligence agencies when dealing with communications between the United States and foreign countries. The National Security Agency is also prohibited from collecting intelligence on people residing in the United States, whether they are U.S. citizens or not, without a warrant under the Foreign Intelligence Advisory Act. Signals intelligence is a source of measuring chatter, which is an indicator of terrorist activity. Interpreting chatter is difficult. For example, the press reported that the Congressional Joint Inquiry was told about intercepted communications collected on September 10, 2001, saying, quote, tomorrow is 0 hour, and end quote, and about an imminent beginning of, quote, the match, end quote. Additional information later came to light within the intelligence community, however, that suggests this information was connected with the opening of the Taliban and al-Qaeda military offensive in Afghanistan against the Northern Alliance, following on the September 9 al-Qaeda assassination of the Northern Alliance's leader, rather than the 9/11 attacks. Finally, open sources, the systematic collection of foreign media, has always been a bedrock source of information for intelligence. Open sources remain important, including on terrorist groups that use the media and the internet to communicate leadership guidance. This mission was performed by the Foreign Broadcast Information Service. That service has been shredded, as one official put it to us, by budget cuts during the 1990s. But by 2001, the FBIS had built a significant translation effort for terrorism-related media. The FBIS believes its charter bars open source collection of foreign language media within the United States. The overall management of the intelligence community's collection efforts is critical. Beginning in 1999, both Assistant DCI for Collection, Charles Allen, and CTC Director, Kofor Black, devoted significant attention to improving the collection of intelligence against the al-Qaeda sanctuary in Afghanistan. In Staff Statement 7, we mentioned the plan developed to energize recruitment of human agents. These efforts complemented ingenious efforts already underway to improve the collection of signals intelligence. In these SIGINT efforts, the CIA relied heavily on its own efforts, sometimes working well with NSA, sometimes quarreling. But they ultimately failed to achieve an adequate combined effort. There were some commendable initiatives. Backed by the White House, Assistant DCI Allen worked with military officers in the Joint Staff during the spring and summer of 2000 to come up with innovative collection ideas. One of these was the Predator drone that first flew over Afghanistan in September 2000. Strategic collection management depends upon strategic analysis to define the baseline of what is known, what is not known, and to guide the setting of clear, agreed requirements. This process did not occur. Assistant DCI Allen concentrated on day-to-day collection challenges with enormous energy and dedication. However, there was no comprehensive collection strategy to pull together human sources, imagery, signals intelligence, and open sources. Even the plan was essentially a CIA plan, not one for the intelligence community as a whole. Mr. Chairman, I'll move to page 10, towards the bottom, DCI Tenet's War. On December 4, 1998, DCI Tenet issued a directive to several CIA officials and the DDCI for Community Management stating, "We are at war. I want no resources or people spared in this effort, either inside CIA or the community." Unfortunately, we found the memorandum had little overall effect on mobilizing CIA or the intelligence community. The memo was addressed only to CIA officials and the Deputy DCI for Community Management, Joan Dempsey. She faxed the memo to the heads of the major agencies of the intelligence community. Almost all our interviewees had never seen the memo or only learned of it after 9/11. The NSA director at the time, Lieutenant General Kenneth Minahan, told us he believed the memo applied only to CIA and not NSA, since he had not been informed, since no one had informed him of any NSA shortcomings. On the other hand, CIA officials thought the memorandum was intended for the rest of the community, given the fact that they had already been doing all they could, and they thought that the community needed to pull its weight. The episode indicates some of the limitations of the DCI's authority over the direction and priorities of the intelligence community. Congress attempted to strengthen his authority in 1996 by creating the positions of Deputy DCI for Community Management and Assistant DCIs for Collection, Analysis and Production, and Administration. Perhaps their authority is not great enough. Perhaps it is not used enough. The vision of central coordination, however, has not been realized. The DCI did not develop a management strategy for a war against terrorism before 9/11. Such a management strategy would define the capabilities the intelligence community must acquire for such a war, from language training to collection systems to analysts. Such a management strategy would necessarily extend beyond the CTC to the components that feed its expertise and support its operations, linked transparently to counterterrorism objectives. It would then detail the proposed expenditures and organizational changes required to implement these capabilities. DCI Tenet and the CIA's Deputy Director for Operations told us they did have a management strategy for the war on terrorism. It was called Rebuilding the CIA. They said the CIA as a whole had been badly damaged by prior budget constraints and that capability needed to be restored across the board. Indeed, the CTC had survived the budget cuts with less damage than many other components within the agency. By restoring funding across the CIA, a rising tide would lift all boats. They also stressed the synergy between improvements in every part of the agency and the capabilities that the CTC or stations overseas could draw upon in the war on terrorism. As some officials pointed out to us, the trade-off of this management approach is that by attempting to rebuild everything, the highest priority efforts might get only an average share, not maximum support. Further, this approach tended to take relatively strong outside support for combating terrorism and try to channel this support into across-the-board funding increases. Proponents of the counterterrorism agenda might be less inclined to loosen the purse strings than they would have been if offered a convincing counterterrorism budget strategy. The DCI's management strategy was also primarily focused on the CIA. DCI Tenet and his predecessors had not developed the management and administrative tools to run the intelligence community that most federal departments use to monitor and rationalize their resources against priorities. The intelligence community did not have a financial accounting system, a chief financial officer, or a comptroller. The CIA had these tools for its own operations. The intelligence community did not. Instead, to manage the community as a whole, the DCI relied on a variety of financial systems maintained by different agencies and without standardized definitions for expenditures. Lacking a management strategy for the war on terrorism or ways to see how funds were being spent across the community, it was difficult for the DCI Tenet and his aides to develop an overall intelligence community budget for the war on terrorism. The administration and Congress relied on supplemental appropriations to increase counterterrorism funding. While supplementals were a useful one-time plus-up, the DCI was not able to build long-term capabilities. The community also lacked a common information architecture that would help to ensure the integration of counterterrorism data across CIA, NSA, DIA, the FBI, and other agencies. In 1998, the DCI Tenet called for such an integration in his strategic intent for the intelligence community with a vision of greater unity and horizontal integration across the community, but the intelligence community did not develop a plan to achieve it before 9/11. Finally, the community had not institutionalized a process for learning from its successes and failures. We did not find any after-action reviews sponsored by the intelligence community after surprise terrorist attacks, such as the embassy bombings of August 1998 or the USS Cole attack in October 2000. The community participated in Inspector General inquiries conducted by individual agencies, but these reviews were perceived as fault-finding, without enough constructive emphasis on learning lessons and discovering best practices. What we did not find was anything between the extremes of no investigation at all and an adversarial inquiry triggered by a public outcry. We did not find an institution or culture that provided a safe outlet for admitting errors and improving procedures.
In conclusion, our investigation so far has found the intelligence community struggling to collect on and analyze the phenomena of transnational terrorism through the mid to late 1990s. While many dedicated officers worked day and night for years to piece together the growing body of evidence on al-Qaeda and to understand the threats, in the end it was not enough to gain the advantage before the 9/11 attacks. While there were many reports on bin Laden and his growing al-Qaeda organization, there was no comprehensive estimate of the enemy either to build consensus or clarify differences. With the important exception of attacks with chemical, biological, radiological, or nuclear weapons, the methods developed for decades to warn of surprise attacks were not applied to the problem of warning against terrorist attacks. In intelligence collection, despite many excellent efforts, there was not a comprehensive review of what the community knew, what it did not know, followed by the development of a community-wide plan to close those gaps. The DCI labored within and was accountable for a community of loosely associated agencies and departmental offices that lack the incentives to cooperate, collaborate, and share information. Like his predecessors, he focused his energies on where he could add the greatest value, the CIA, which is a fraction of the nation's overall intelligence capability. And as a result, the question remains, who is in charge of intelligence?